What is up? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the podcast. Um, Today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the injury news that came out from the Ryan Divish article yesterday in the Seattle Times. Just going to go over a couple of the points, mainly with Matt Brash and Luis Urias. I'm going to give my take on it. I didn't get a chance to check the game yet today, so not really any post-game stuff from the Mariners spring training game. I'm not even positive they won or lost today. I think Cal Raleigh went deep and Logan Gilbert looked pretty good. Haven't even checked the box score on that. Figured the injury stuff's a little more important. I did touch on it a bit yesterday in my video, but that, of course, right after my video was published, the Divish article came out, which, again, we don't have any definitive news, but it goes into it a little more in depth. So I'm going to get into that in this video. Before I do that, as always, hit that like button for me. Helps out the channel tremendously. And hit that sub button. I'm now, I think, 13 subs away from 2,700. Would love to be there before opening day if you guys can help me out. I know a lot of times people stop by, they like to watch the videos, but sometimes you don't hit subscribe. If you are someone that enjoys the content, do me a favor, hit that sub button and use that SeatGeek code JS Trident for $20 off your first purchase on SeatGeek through the app or their website. Baseball, hockey, basketball, all sports. SeatGeek's got tickets for all of them. So go ahead and use my promo code for $20 off your first time purchase. So Ryan Divish of the Seattle Times yesterday had an article. It was actually what will the Mariners roster look like on opening day? He gives a bit of a projection on it. But I'm going to focus mainly on the two, I guess, the most major injuries that have come out of camp, Matt Brash and Luis Urias. Go over Divish's notes on it and give my thoughts on it. So in terms of the bullpen, Divish has 8 players projected to make the opening day roster: Munoz, Santos, Vargas, Coar, Thornton, Voth, Saucedo, Spire. Probably sounds about right, but here's his takes on it and what he says about reliever Matt Brash. He goes, there is a name missing from the projected bullpen who is expected to play a major role this season. Right-hander Matt Brash was shut down from throwing after feeling banged up following his bullpen session last Tuesday. The young reliever didn't provide many details, but looked down at his elbow during the conversation. Manager Scott Service had no details on the situation, both in his morning media session and in a recent radio interview. He wouldn't provide details on where Brash is hurting. Service said they will have an update to the issue in the next couple of days. Industry sources believe that Brash could miss an extensive amount of time, possibly this season. Even if the updates are positive on Brash's arm, he likely won't be ready for opening day, and the Mariners won't rush his progress. So obviously, the concerning thing there is that industry sources believe that he could miss extensive time or possibly the season. Obviously, that's the most concerning aspect of that note with Matt Brash. Obviously, listen, we still don't know, and Divish isn't, he's just reporting on what he's heard. We don't know. Listen, so I don't want to get too over the top on this until we have a definitive answer that needs Tommy John, or just for whatever reason, Matt Brash is going to miss the season. Until we hear that, it is still speculation. But the fact that there are people within the industry that think it's a very legit possibility is probably not just coming out of nowhere. The Mariners have been very coy about it. Now, sometimes that doesn't mean anything. Sometimes managers, GMs aren't going to give you all the answers, but the fact they've been very forthcoming that they think Julio will be back this weekend and stuff like that makes it a little bit more concerning that they've been quiet on the Matt Brash front. First and foremost with this, let's just, for this discussion, let's assume he does miss the season. I don't know if that's going to happen, but, we've got to talk about that possibility because it is certainly out there now that Matt Brash could miss the season. I do not blame Jerry or Scott or anybody for this. The only reason I bring that up is I've seen a few people, on Twitter. I saw a couple people that were kind of blaming Scott for this because Brash pitched a lot last season. Guys, every pitcher in baseball is one pitch away from needing season-ending surgery. And we don't know that about Brash yet, but again, just assuming it for the sake of for the point here, every pitcher is one pitch away from needing Tommy John. Robbie Ray threw 15 pitches last year and got hurt and was out for the year. It can happen whether you throw one pitch or 1,000 pitches. Throwing overhand is not your body's natural motion, and trying to break off sliders is certainly not your arm's natural motion. So you lend yourself to injury risk. We talk about football is a violent sport. Injuries happen. Baseball certainly isn't as violent as football in terms of hitting, but you're putting your body through a lot. It can happen to any pitcher. And last year, like the Mariners were in a pennant race. Yeah, Brash pitched a lot. When you're in a pennant race, your main guys are going to be out there a lot. And had the Mariners made the playoffs, Brash would have pitched even more in the postseason. So there's just nothing you can do about that. Obviously, like, you shouldn't run guys out there for all 162, but I think Scott's done a pretty good job of balancing that, making sure the guys aren't going so many days in a row. And it goes both ways. If he goes with more load management stuff, then it's, well, these guys' arms aren't ready, so they're getting hurt. And then if guys pitch too much, well, they've pitched too much. So there's no way to balance that stuff. I mean, there is ways to balance it, but this is not on Scott, Jerry. Now, if you want to get on Jerry and Scott for some other things, that's totally fine. I'm not saying they're flawless. They're guys that have flaws. Matt Brash's injury, if it ends up being something season ending, whatever, is not on them. It does happen. It's unfortunate. Do I think the Mariners are screwed if they lose Matt Brash for the season? It certainly stings. Matt Brash is an outstanding reliever, one of the best in the American League. And after that, BABIP normalized a little bit after April, May, it was lights out from June towards the end of the year. It is a huge blow to the bullpen. And this is a Mariners team that is already needing a lot of injury-prone guys to stay healthy. You're hoping Mitch Haniger can stay healthy, Mitch Garver, Jorge Polanco. Brian Wu has had injuries. Bullpen guys, Munoz missed time last year. So a roster that already needs a lot of guys to stay healthy if they want to win the division, which I think they can. It stings to maybe already have one guy possibly down. Now, at the end of the day, relievers are valuable, but you can overcome it. I mean, even the best reliever is worth, a win and a half or so above replacement level. I'm not sure. I don't have it in front of me what Matt Brash's wins above replacement level was last year, but relievers can only contribute so much, right? To me, is 50 innings of Matt Brash the end of the world for this team? No, I think you can overcome that. You could have, maybe someone steps up, and maybe it's a Trent Thornton just has a really good year, and that kind of can counteract Matt Brash. I'm not comparing Thornton to Brash, but you guys know what I mean. You can have someone step up. You could still go sign somebody. And now that Gregory Santos trade looks genius because they absolutely need Santos. The downside is, again, this is assuming Matt Brash misses the year. We don't know, but getting Santos was kind of like an icing on the cake or a special dessert. You've had a great meal and now a special dessert comes in Gregory Santos. So it's just like, oh yeah, one more. We got this back end of the bullpen is loaded. Well, now Santos is more of the meal. You've got to eat to survive. Now they need Gregory Santos healthy. Not saying they didn't need it before, but now you absolutely, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is not just a little extra topping on your pizza. Santos is in the dough. I'm always doing food analogies. I'm not even hungry this time, I promise. I just ate. So hopefully that makes sense what I'm trying to say. But, now the Santos edition becomes, it's not so much a luxury anymore. It's a need, I guess is what I would say, if that makes sense. So I think they can survive it. I don't think, if you think the Mariners can win the division, I don't think that opinion should change. But this is a super competitive AL West. Do I think the Mariners can win the division? Absolutely. They could finish third place. It wouldn't shock me either. Texas, Houston, and Seattle are all very close, in my opinion. So it doesn't take much one way or the other to maybe move that needle a little bit. My prediction is Seattle wins the division. I'm also a Mariners fan, but it wouldn't shock me if it goes Houston, Texas, Seattle, Texas, Houston, Seattle, Texas, Seattle, whatever order you want to do it in. None of those would surprise me. And this is a possible blow to a strength of the Mariners with their bullpen. So do I think it's season ending? No. To me, there's only two players on this team that really, I think them being out for the year would pretty much make me go, that's not happening. And that's Julio and Cal Raleigh, part because of how good they are, part because the depth behind them isn't as great. And you might be thinking, Jay, what about JP? JP is fantastic. If JP was lost for the season, it would be brutal. But I do think they could do some things with Rojas and Bliss and maybe survive it. You know what I'm saying? It would be bad. Losing Castillo would be bad. Losing Kirby would be bad. Losing Gilbert would be bad. But I do think you can counteract those moves a little bit. Julio and Cal, to me, there's just nothing you could do if one of those guys went down outside of, Blake Hunt just having a out of the blue MVP season replacing Cal. So getting back to the Matt Brash point, yes, I think they can survive it, but it is a blow to the bullpen. So the good news is a lot of these guys in the bullpen have looked pretty good so far in spring. And you've got some interesting depth pieces that have pitched pretty well so far. If Vargas can get that control back a little bit, then, he can definitely be a big part of the bullpen. Coar's looked really solid in spring training as well. So it might sound like I'm trying to cope with a little bit. I'm really not. Brash would be a huge, huge loss for this bullpen. But there are ways that it can be overcome, but it doesn't mean it's not a blow. So we'll see what happens. Again, nothing set in stone. Divish did mention in a tweet today, he thinks maybe you'll hear more on it on Friday. So I will definitely have a video up on that as soon as we learn more. But the fact that, Divish is mentioning that industry sources believe he could miss an extensive amount of time, possibly the season, is concerning. Hopefully it's maybe similar to Munoz last year where it's just a month or so and they can get Brash back by May or June. So that's the updates with Matt Brash. Now we're going to move on to the infielders here and talk a little bit about Luis Urias. Now, I mentioned Urias yesterday and he DH'd a couple days ago, and I kind of figured he's probably on his way back since he's getting at bats. But it sounds like he may be a little bit further away than we think. So this is Divish's take on this. This is from the Seattle Times article. He says, Crawford is locked up in the shortstop spot, but who is playing to his right when the season opens is interesting. Luis Urias isn't listed on the projected roster that Divish had. He doesn't have Luis Urias on the opening day roster for infielders. He has France, Polanco, Crawford, Rojas, Moore, and Haggerty. I lost my space here. Luis Urias isn't listed on the projected roster due to issues with his throwing shoulder, which we knew. After an uninspiring stint playing winter ball in Mexico, if you don't know, his numbers in the Winter League were not good. Urias arrived at spring training in less than stellar shape and dealing with the shoulder issue. While he has been playing catch, a very light and deliberate toss at about 70 feet, he seems to be a long way from being able to throw across the dime with any authority. Until the changes, he is projected to be on the injured list when the season starts. Urias is considered a below-average defensive third baseman, even with a healthy shoulder. Not too concerned about the last part. We knew that already, that defense wasn't his strength, but you got to be able to throw across the diamond. Now, listen, the injury, again, things happen. Guys get hurt, right? Like, that's not anybody's fault. However, it is very concerning to hear that arrived at spring training in less than stellar shape. Now, again, and this isn't, I'm not saying any of this I'm about to say here to knock Divish, but I don't know what that fully means. Maybe he meant in shape based on the shoulder, but I don't think that's what it's implying. I think it's implying more that he came into camp just out of shape a little bit. And for a guy that has been DFA'd before and has been traded, that's concerning because this is a first impression. I'm not saying it's going to show up out of shape 7 years with an organization or with a company or anything. But man, when you get a fresh start somewhere and a chance to maybe reinvent yourself a little bit, you want to make a good first impression. So that's concerning just from a player drive mentality that concerns me. The fact that he showed up out of shape. And then it makes you wonder, well, is the shoulder hurting because he wasn't in shape? Was that something that affected him there? So that makes it a little bit more concerning as well. Now, Urias to me is not as big a loss as Brash. Even though he's a position player, I think there's a lot of plug and play you can do there at third base. But this one to me does fall. Now, the injury I'm not putting on Scott or Jerry or Justin. If everything checked out fine with the medicals and they made the trade and then it happened after, things happen, right? Injuries are just unfortunately part of the game. A lot of things in sports is just who's healthy at the end of the day. Sometimes those are the teams that come out on top. A lot of times. So that's not their fault, but it does a little bit with the Urias trade. And I defended the trade and I feel like I'm repeating myself 100 times these videos, but I have no problem trading a reliever for someone that could be an everyday position player. Urias has been good in 22 and 21, productive player. So bringing a guy like that in makes some sense, but it's just the third base discussion has been one of the biggest this offseason. They traded away Eugenio Suarez, who certainly I think was showing some signs of decline. The bat speed looked a little slower. Fly balls died at the warning track. The defense was still good. And you could make a case if you didn't trade Gino, then you're not getting Mitch Garver, and maybe you're not able to take on the Haniger contract, some stuff like that. So, I don't want to just sit here and go, oh, they should have just kept Gino 100%, and then you wouldn't be worried about this. But then, and some of you might be like, well, I'd rather have Gino at third and figure something else out at DH. But remember last year how frustrating the DH position was. So some of this falls on ownership as well with this stuff. But it does make you kind of go back the Gino trade, which, listen, salary dump, yes, but obviously, you could salary dump Julio. You're not going to do that because Julio is going to be good and productive. So Gino was someone that they viewed as expendable for a salary dump. And now one of his platoon replacements is coming into camp out of shape. It's just kind of a bad look, I think. Now, again, I'm not indicting Jerry and Justin for this, but it certainly looks like a trade. And then with Matt Brash going out, you sit there and go, oh, Isaiah Campbell might look okay in this bullpen. So it's kind of all come full circle a little bit. I put it more on ownership. It's, when you got a penny pinch stuff, and again, I don't really care why they're doing it, but they're doing it. This is what you run into. Then you got to get these guys here like Urias to replace Gino, trying to do that. And then boom, it can blow up in your face a little bit. So we'll see what ends up happening. Certainly concerning. Again, the injury is the injury. The out of shape stuff makes me a little pretty mad because and listen, I'm out of shape, so I'm not trying to criticize professional athletes here, but it's their job to show up in shape and have that. So it's a little concerning for someone coming to a new organization that wasn't in shape. So what do they do at third base? We talked a little bit where the bullpen can survive without Brash. Can the infield survive without Luis Urias? Well, yeah, of course. I think that's one that you can overcome, just organizational depth. Brian Anderson's in camp. Michael Chavis, you could just roll with Rojas at third. Polanco hasn't played a ton of third, but you could put Polanco at third and Ryan Bliss at second. I mean, they're maybe Tyler Locklear out of spring training. I doubt that, but that's a possibility. So Samad Taylor as well. So there's plenty of options to platoon with Rojas. I know people bring up Matt Chapman again. My thoughts on Chapman hasn't really changed from where I was last week when I did the video on him and Snell. 1-year deal, 2-year deal with an option in there. Sure. I do think Chapman is probably your better bet. If like you to say, out of every option that Mariners could have for third base, take away contracts, just, that's available, I should say. What's the best bet to be the best player in 24? Gun to my head, I'd probably say Matt Chapman is your best bet just with the defensive value, probably run into enough home runs and slug just enough where, even if he gives you 2.5 to 3 wins of above replacement level, that might be better than what you're going to get. I just don't like the idea of giving a ton of years and a ton of money to Matt Chapman. I don't think he's going to get that necessarily. I don't know. All it takes is one team to jump in there. I know the Mariners have reached out. I think it was more of a reach out in terms of hey, we're getting close to the regular season. Any chance 1-2-year deal maybe? And it sounded like that, his camp was talking about $100 million dollars for what they wanted. I don't think that's going to happen for Matt Chapman, but he could get 575, 470, 580, something like that. Isn't, I think, completely out of the realm of possibility. And that's not something I'd necessarily want to do. If that's the case, I'd probably just either go with Rojas, hope Urias gets healthy, really follow Tyler Locklear's development in the minors this year, Ryan Bliss. I'd go with something more along those lines as well. Or if Matt Chapman signs somewhere, look who their current third baseman is and maybe bring that person over if it's a decent option. So my thoughts on Chapman remain the same. A smaller, shorter deal, sure. And listen, if the Mariners did sign Chapman to a big deal, 5-6 years, I wouldn't come on complaining about it too much. I do think it makes the team better for this year. So, I wouldn't sit here and throw a fit about it. It's not my money, so I don't really care in terms of that at the end of the day. But, if you're paying that much money to Matt Chapman, it will affect things down the road. And while I do think Chapman would probably be an upgrade in 2024, it's not like I think Chapman's going to come here and be an MVP candidate either. And again, if you were frustrated by Eugenio Suarez last year with some of his, swing and miss and stuff, Matt Chapman's going to be a lot of the same. And I don't think they're going to do it unless they can get Chapman really, really cheap, because they jettison Geno, who's kind of a similar skill set to Chapman a little bit. So, sorry, I just forgot two computers going off here with messages, but I don't think they're going to do that to salary dump that contract and then just give that money to Matt Chapman. I don't know. I don't see it happening. So it would probably be, I don't think it's going to happen. But yeah, for me, a shorter deal, sure, absolutely. Why would I say no to that? But long term, I don't want a lot of money in years tied into a guy that I think is declining, and last year was carried by a very, very strong April and May. So not against it. And if they do sign it long term, I'm not going to complain about it. But I don't think it's going to happen. So we'll see what they end up doing at third base. Definitely disappointing. Listen, injuries happen. It's unfortunate. It's part of the game. Hopefully both guys, it's just minor stuff and they're ready to go, because even though Urias already kind of frustrating us, I do think he is the best option on the roster or in the organization, at least right now, to fill that role that he has. Whether you like him or not, I would predict him to outperform Brian Anderson, Samad Taylor, Michael Chavis, Ryan Bliss. So it would be nice to have him healthy and in shape. Brash, you're not going to be able to replace Matt Brash. Just hope for the best and hope that someone else steps up. That is one good thing with relievers. You can find a lot of hidden gems. So while I don't think you're going to find someone with the lights out stuff of Matt Brash, you could maybe find, another Justin Topa, who is not Matt Brash good, but good enough to get you outs in the late innings and help you win some baseball games. So at the end of the day, hopefully it's just something minor. Well, I don't think it's minor, but hopefully these guys are back and this is just all speculation. But I did want to do a video talking about both guys. So that's all I've got. Have a great night, everybody. Hopefully we got some more positive news to talk about. I hate this early already. We're not even a week into this, and we're already talking about two guys that we're going to play fairly substantial roles for the 2024 Mariners, possibly missing pretty significant time. So onwards and upwards for the next video. But do me a favor, like I said, hit that like button, hit subscribe. If you're just casually watching, hit that sub button, helps out a ton. Don't forget to use promo code JS Trident for $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. I will be back maybe tomorrow with the post-game recap. I'll see how my day's going. Love y'all. Have a great night and go Mariners. Peace.